Now, 1 Nephi 1 and 1. I, Nephi, having been born of goodly parents, therefore I was taught somewhat in all the learning of my father. Typical colophon. We've had this information since the 1950s through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, so on and so forth. Nibley was the first one to call attention to this remarkable thing in Lehi in the desert, this literary apparatus that the ancient writers used in their autobiographies. And it is in the Book of Mormon, the first page, the first verse. Magnificent. This does nothing to demonstrate the Book of Mormon is a 19th century product. It does something to show that this ancient autobiographical literary technique called a colophon is an ancient device. And it happens to date back to 600 BC at a minimum. In Lehi in the desert, I'm using the collected Nibley works, 1988. This was in his original, and I believe it was 1957, Lehi in the desert. He says on page 17, he says, the first 3 verses of 1 Nephi, sharply set off from the rest of the text, these are a typical colophon, a literary device that is highly characteristic of Egyptian compositions. Again, the Egyptian-Hebrew connection that the Book of Mormon is so powerfully resonates with. Typical is the famous Bremer-Rind papyrus, which opens with the colophon containing the date of the work, the titles of Nasim, the author, the names of his parents, and a word in praise of their virtues, with special mention of his father's prophetic calling. The 4th item is a curse against anyone who might take the book away, probably due to fear lest a sacred book should get into impure hands. Compare this with Nephi's colophon. He gives us his name, I, Nephi, the merits of his parents with special attention to the learning of his father, a solemn avowal corresponding to Nasim's curse that the record is true, and the assertion, I make it with mine own hand. 1 Nephi 1:3. An indispensable condition of every true colophon, since the purpose of a colophon is to establish the identity of the actual writer down, not merely of the ultimate author, but who wrote this part of the record. Egyptian literary writings regularly close with the formula U-F Pu. Thus it is, and so it is. Nephi ends the main sections of his verse with the phrase, and thus it is, amen. Look these up. He says that in 1 Nephi 9 and 6, 1 Nephi 14 and 30, and 1 Nephi 22 and 31. It's a beautiful indication of the type of document we're dealing with. The great preoccupation and the concern displayed in the Book of Mormon for matters of writing, Lehi's passion for writing everything down, Nephi tells us that in chapter 1, verse 16, you see. Lehi had his own record. Very interesting. The obvious pride of writers in their skill, these are peculiarly Egyptian. Nephi saying, I make this with my own hand, is simply the Egyptian written by my own fingers. You see, even they identify that. And we can almost hear Nephi speaking in the words of an Egyptian sage, copy thy fathers who have gone before thee. This is precisely what we find Nephi doing, basing his materials and his observations from his father Lehi's record. That ended up being the missing 116 pages. S. Camp Brown has some wonderful materials on that also. So behold, their words are recorded in writing. Open and read and copy. Now certainly Nephi himself was diligent in keeping this seboyet. It's called a seboyet. It was the Egyptian, not the Hebrew gentleman, who advertised his proficiency in the art of the scribe. Thoroughly Egyptian also is Lehi's didactic spirit. That is, his power of teaching, his ability to teach his children and others. His didactic spirit, and his habit of giving long formal addresses on moral and religious subjects, in the manner of the fathers, we are told, to his sons. Like a good Egyptian, he wrote all of this down. The form of these discourses, with their set introductions and their formal imagery, might have come right out of an Egyptian schoolroom, though their content smacks more of the learning of the Jews, as Nephi himself observes. See, Nephi takes up the writings of Isaiah, and he discusses Jeremiah with his people, and he has his own visions and dreams about his own adventures, so on and so forth. Both in form and content, however, the writings of the prophets and the wisdom of Israel are found to resemble the prophetic as well as the wisdom literature of the Jews and of Egypt very closely. So we need not be surprised if Lehi's prophecies do the same thing. At the end of the last century, scholars were mystified to find that a demonic prophecy, which they found dated to the time of Bochorus, that is 712 BC. This is just maybe 100 years before Nephi. This demonic prophecy, in which coming destructions were predicted with the promise of a Messiah to follow, was put into the mouth of the Lamb, the Pahib. Whoa, that's getting close to the Book of Mormon Nephi here, isn't it? Greek sources inform us that this prophecy enjoyed great circulation in ancient times. The strange wording of Lehi's great prophecy uttered by the Lamb in 1 Nephi chapter 13, verse 34 and 41, is thus seen to be no anachronism taken from Hellenistic or Christian times, as it used to be maintained. So it goes, and Nibley also noted in his book Since Cumorah this idea of colophons on page 151. He says, the major writings of the Book of Mormon are introduced and concluded by colophons, which have the purpose of acquainting the reader with the source of the material given and informing him of the authorship of that source. And then he compares the Bremeride papyrus also. But notice he gives a list of colophons here. This isn't just a single odd one out as a mere lucky guess for Joseph Smith. No, the internal consistency of the Book of Mormon here really shines, because there's not just one colophon. There's many of them, showing it is a steadfast, consistent, steady, ancient usage as a literary device. Other colophons are found at 1 Nephi 1, 1 through 3, 1 Nephi chapter 22, 30 through 31. I want you to look these up and read them. Truly, these are colophons. Jacob 1 and 2, Jacob 7, verse 27, Jerem 1, 1 and 2, Omni 1, 1 and then 3 and 4, the words of Mormon, chapter 1, verse 9, Mosiah, chapter 1, verse 4, chapter 9, verse 1, and Helaman, chapter 16, verse 25. Now that's fascinating that there is an internal consistency involved with the colophons. And then I'll get more to that here in a little while. Now, John Twetness took up this idea of the colophons, and he noted, I'm going to try to, boy, I made a stack of books. I think I stacked them backwards. This is in a really wonderful book, Re-Exploring the Book of Mormon, edited by John W. Welch. Let me see if I can get the date. Oh, I've read this book so many times I'm wearing it out. 1992 by Deseret Book.